If you're traveling to Germany this year, make sure you watch this video because I'll be covering all sorts of tips and tricks that you won't find in your typical travel guides. Hi, I'm Christina from happytowonder.com, and I lived in Germany for over 5 years, so I have a lot of tips, and obviously I'm a huge fan, so I'm super excited to share. Now let's start with some tips about Germany travel planning. The first thing that you need to know is Germany is made up of 16 different federal states. Most visitors tend to flock to just a select few, but of course there are really cool places all around the country that are well worth visiting. For instance, there's amazing beaches and maritime history up in Schleswig-Holstein. Hamburg is a really cool city. There's a lot of really cool castles and historic cities along Rhineland-Palatinate. There's beautiful nature and cities in Saxony as well. The list goes on and on. And you can check my website for more recommendations about different places in Germany that I visited and loved. Now, in terms of timing, maybe I'm very biased, but I do think that Germany is a great year-round destination. If you're having trouble deciding what time of year to be doing your Germany trip, I highly recommend looking into different festivals and cool events that take place throughout the year to see if any of them particularly appeal to you. So in winter, for instance, I love visiting Germany in winter just because there's the Christmas markets. And contrary to popular belief, it's not just the big cities that have Christmas markets. Literally every small village, every small town will have their own version of a Christmas market at some point during the season. So it's a really amazing time to be visiting. Besides that though, in wintertime, there's also Carnival and Fasching, which is really fun. And there's also a few different beer festivals in Bavaria as well, like the Starkbierfest. If you visit during the spring, there's more festivals, and the cherry blossoms in Bonn are especially beautiful. I highly recommend visiting those. Summer is honestly just when Germany comes alive. You know, every city is filled with green spaces, with local sunbathing and enjoying the sunshine. There's lots of amazing hikes. And then of course there's fall, which is my personal favorite season to be visiting Germany because there's all these amazing festivals, whether you're looking for the world's biggest beer festival, world's biggest wine festival, or world's biggest pumpkin festival. All these take place in Germany during the fall, and honestly the foliage and landscapes are just unreal. Now in terms of hotels, of course if you're traveling in Germany's bigger cities, there's going to be a lot of hotel chains that you are used to, but once you start venturing off into the smaller towns or smaller villages, there aren't usually the big chain hotels like Hilton or Marriott or anything like that. So you will have to experiment with smaller hotels or guest houses. So it might be a little bit different to what you're used to if you're used to staying in typical chain hotels, but they're a really fun experience, and I highly recommend venturing a bit more off the beaten path because they can be a lot more budget friendly as well. If you are looking to save money, one German hotel chain that I can highly recommend is called Motel One. So contrary to the name Motel One, it has nothing to do with motels. It's actually a very chic sort of German chain with small rooms, but usually good locations and kind of just a nice stylish atmosphere. But the good part about these hotels is they're often very well located, and also the prices are very fair. So if you're looking for something that's budget friendly but clean, I can highly recommend them. All right, so now it's time to tackle some culture and etiquette tips for Germany. The first one to keep in mind is that Germany is actually a very diverse country. So there's a lot of stereotypes about Germany when you're coming from abroad, like you imagine the lederhosen, the castles, the mountains, but it's important to note that those stereotypes tend to come from just kind of a few specific regions more in the south, and a lot of Germans kind of are resentful of these stereotypes because they don't identify with them at all. So depending on which places you're visiting in Germany, make sure to research the cultural norms specific to that region, and don't go wearing your lederhosen around Hamburg because they just don't do that there. Another important thing is no matter where you go, I do think it's good to know how to say hello and thank you. There are a lot of regional variations when it comes to greetings, but one that you can't go wrong with is hallo or hello, and of course thank you is danke. A bonus word that I think is helpful to know is Entschuldigung, which means excuse me. So it can be like, excuse me, pardon me, as you're weaving through a crowd. It can also be like, Entschuldigung, excuse me, can you help me find this brand of potato? Another important tip is to ask people if they speak English before you start speaking English to them. Truth be told, most Germans, especially young ones, can speak excellent English, but it's always more polite to just ask them if they speak it by saying, oh, sprechen Sie English? Odds are they'll say they speak a little bit of English, and then they'll go on to spout the most poetic English you've ever heard in your life. So don't worry, most people do speak English, but just make sure you politely ask them first instead of assuming. Another must know is that most things are closed on Sundays. You've probably heard this before, but Sundays are a day of rest across Germany. So most supermarkets, most shops are not open on Sundays. Of course, restaurants and bakeries tend to be open, but if you're hoping to do any shopping or anything like that, everything will be closed on a Sunday. The main exception though is supermarkets and grocery stores that are in train stations or at the airport, but just keep in mind the stuff there will be a bit more expensive. Another important thing is to learn how tipping works in Germany, because the system there is a little bit different to what we're used to in North America. Basically in Germany, when you tip, you say the full amount that you want to pay, including tip, when you give them the money or your card. So let's say including tip, you want to give them 50 euros total, then you'll look at them and say 50, and then they'll know to give you change for that amount or to put that amount into the card machine. The card machines in Germany don't have tipping options within the machine, so you do have to clarify beforehand how much you want to tip, otherwise they're assuming that you're not going to tip at all, and then it gets a bit awkward. Of course, tipping isn't as expected in Germany as it is in North America. Typically though, you'll be tipping a lot less, so you'll be tipping about 10% on good service, or you're just rounding up in cases like taxis and things like that. But while tipping culture isn't as big in Germany, one really big culture shock that a lot of visitors don't expect is you actually have to pay to use the bathroom a lot of the time. So even if you're at a train station or at a McDonald's or something, oftentimes you'll have to pay 50 cents or €1 to go use the washroom. But the good thing is, in these cases, this means that they're paying for someone to be cleaning the washrooms really actively. So oftentimes the public washrooms in Germany are just spotlessly clean, but you do have to pay for it. And this isn't exclusive to just train stations and businesses. Actually, in restaurants and clubs and at events and beer gardens, there's often a bathroom attendant. So in those cases, you are expected to tip like 50 cents or €1 for those bathroom attendants as well. So just make sure you have coins on you, because you'll often encounter these and it's really awkward when you don't have any cash to give them. Another big culture shock for a lot of visitors is that they'll notice a lot of Germans like to stare. And culturally, for them, it's not considered rude because they're just kind of perceiving you and observing you, and it's not considered like a judgy thing. So it's not a big deal. Don't take it personally. Another cultural norm to be mindful of though is that you should probably try to keep your voice down. In general, North Americans speak a lot louder than Germans do, especially on places like public transport, which tend to be quiet. And on that note, people don't tend to speak on public transport that much. So just kind of observe the situation around you. You know, if it's really quiet on the train and there's no one talking, it's probably a good cue for you to also not talk. Another thing to avoid is small talk. I feel like in North America, small talk is very common, but in Germany, they don't really do with those pleasantries very often. So just keep in mind, they're not super big on small talk, so don't try to force it if it feels like they're not feeling it. Another thing to avoid is jaywalking as well. I have never met a group of people so collectively against jaywalking. It could just be a Bavarian thing because I did live in Bavaria for a long time, but err on the side of caution and try not to jaywalk. Another thing to be mindful of is when you're taking photos or videos, try your best to not get any people in your shot. Germans can be incredibly picky about their privacy, and I've had actually quite a few situations when people have told me off for taking a photo because they think I'm taking a photo of them or they happen to be in the frame. So just to err on the side of caution, just make sure that there's no faces super evident in the shot when you're taking photos, or just wait for no one to be around. And just in terms of customer service, don't be surprised if customer service is a little bit frostier in Germany compared to North America. Don't take it personally, it's just a cultural thing. Now, on the flip side, I feel like contradicting a lot of these kind of conservative tips that I've been giving you about Germans, they actually love to be naked. This was a huge culture shock for me when I first moved there, because honestly, they're very free about their bodies over there. So, you know, if you're going to a park in the summer, you'll often see a naked person. Or if you're going to a spa or something, people tend to go naked. Some spas even have rules that you have to be naked for sanitary reasons. So just don't be surprised by that, because a lot of people think that Germans can be stereotypically very uptight, but this is one area that they are not shy about. Now let's chat about German transport and getting around. The first thing is you probably don't need to rent a car. I know a lot of Germans like to make fun of it, but the German public transport system is actually really excellent when you take into account all the different buses and trains that you can take to get from city to city. Honestly, the only instances where you might need to rent a car are if you're planning on going to some smaller villages, or if you're going to a lot of nature spots that are more remote, or if you're looking to get a taste of the infamous German Autobahn. But on that note, it's important to know that not everything you've heard about the Autobahn is true. So if you haven't heard of it before, the Autobahn is the German national highway system, and there's this very popular myth about it that there's no speed limit. That is partially true. There are some stretches of the Autobahn that don't have a speed limit, but it's definitely not the entire thing. So before you get too excited and like plan your whole trip around whizzing down the highway, just know that there are some speed limits on certain stretches. Now, in terms of train travel, I'm going to give you a quick briefer on how the German train system works. Of course, if you want a separate video about this, I'm happy to oblige, just let me know in the comments. But generally speaking, when you're looking at the trains in Germany, there's a few different categories. The most expensive one is the ICE high-speed trains, or the ETIQUETTE high-speed trains. And these are kind of like the fancy bullet trains that take you from city to city really quickly. And with these ones, you do have to book your tickets in advance. Oftentimes you should reserve a seat. And so this is one that you really have to plan for well in advance and hopefully buy tickets really early on for, because the tickets just get more expensive as time goes on. Then there's the intercity and Eurocity trains, and these are also for intercity travel. They go a lot faster than regional trains, but they're not as new or high tech as the ETIQUETTE trains. Pre-booking for these ones isn't necessarily essential, but it is a good idea, in contrast to the regional trains, which are usually the ones that are marked with like the R, RE, M, or ALX. Those are the ones that are the cheaper trains that service shorter routes, usually within one region. These ones move a lot slower, and they also also don't have reservations at all. So you basically just buy the ticket in advance and then show up and then pick whatever seat you can find. Lastly, there's suburban trains. These are more commonly known as S-Bahn, or represented by this symbol, which you'll be seeing all around Germany. And these are basically just trains that take you from the main city into suburbs. So they don't go super far distances, but they're really handy for some smaller day trips and taking you up to the suburbs. Okay, so now that you know the categories, let's talk about how to save money on train tickets. So the number one tip that I have for you if you're looking to save money is to look into regional day tickets. So as I mentioned before, Germany has 16 different states. Most of these states offer a special train ticket that gives you unlimited travel for a day on regional trains specifically. So this can be a really great way to save money if you're doing day trips. For example, in Munich, we have something called the Bavaria ticket. So that works for the entire state of Bavaria. And then you can just pay one set price and get unlimited train rides for the entire day. And the cool thing is a lot of the time you save a lot of money if you're traveling in a group as well. So with the Bavaria ticket, for instance, there's a base rate of like 25 euros and then 7 euros extra for each person you add on. So if you divide it between 5 people, which is the max, you can actually save so much money. And if you plan on covering longer distances, they actually have a Germany-wide version of this ticket as well. It's called this. I've tried pronouncing it like 5 times. I don't know why. It's like a tongue twister for me, so I won't say it out loud. But this is a ticket that allows you unlimited trains throughout Germany for an entire day. Although to be honest, regional trains tend to be quite slow, and I don't really foresee a situation where you would be doing a day trip like over to another state unless you're already really close to the border. On a similar note, be sure to look into day tickets and group tickets for public transport as well when you're in a city. Germany seems to love rewarding you for having friends, so oftentimes you'll be able to find a group ticket or a day ticket that allows you to have unlimited trips on the public transport network in one day, and it's just cheaper if you divide it amongst a few different people. And the last thing I'll say about train travel in Germany is honestly, there can be some delays, especially if you're in the middle of the network. I noticed because I lived in Munich and that's kind of the terminus stop or where the trains tend to depart from. There weren't that many delays for the most part because that's where the train is starting. But anytime I had any trips kind of in the middle of the country, there would always be some kind of delay. But one really good thing is you can actually claim compensation for trains that are delayed. So if your train in Germany is more than an hour late, you are entitled to compensation, which is really great. The annoying thing is the only way to claim this compensation is by filling out a form, and as far as I know, mailing it in. So yes, the process is kind of old school, but if you are in a situation where you are entitled to a lot of money back because of a delay, it might be worth looking into. Now, I know I've been talking a lot about trains, but another really budget-friendly way to travel around Germany is actually taking buses. So there's a few different bus companies that operate in Germany. The biggest one is definitely Flixbus, and with them, you can easily get from city to city for something as cheap as 10 euros. So it's definitely worth looking into. Of course, bus travel does have its downsides. It's definitely not as comfortable as train travel. It can sometimes be slower. And with Flixbus, there can often be delays as well. So I've summarized all the pros and cons in a separate Flixbus review if you want to check that out, but just know that that is an option. Another important thing to note is that public transportation in Germany works on an honesty system. So you'll often notice that even within cities, there's no fare gates or anything like that. That doesn't mean that it's free. You still do need to pay for a ticket and validate it properly, but it's just on an honesty system. And there's sometimes ticket controllers that come to make sure you have the right ticket. But depending on where you are, it's actually not that common. But on that note, it is very important to make sure you validate your tickets because in Germany, just buying a ticket for public transport isn't enough. You need to properly validate it as well. Ignorance is definitely not an excuse in this country. Make sure you buy the right ticket and also validate it properly. Now, in regards to sightseeing, if you're visiting a major city that has a lot of paid attractions, so places like Munich or Berlin, it might be worthwhile to buy a city pass that includes basically all these attractions for a set price. With that said, I do think a lot of the best things to see in Germany happen to be free, so you don't necessarily need to pressure yourself into buying a city card, but if you're a paid attraction person and you plan on seeing a lot, do definitely look into whether or not they have these sightseeing passes because they can save you a ton of money. And if you're looking to cut costs when you're traveling, be sure to look out for museum days. So in Germany, there's a lot of different cities and museums that will offer discounted entry or free entry even on certain days of the month. So in Munich, for example, every Sunday, a bunch of the museums in town offer €1 entry, which is incredible. And in Berlin, I believe it's the first Sunday of every month, they have free admission to a lot of their museums as well. So be sure to look into whether or not the museum that you're interested in does this and hopefully plan around it, and you can get in for free or for really cheap. All right, now let's tackle some final tips for when you arrive in Germany. The first one is to bring cash. So up until recently, Germany has been a surprisingly cash-based society. Most places wouldn't even take card, but after the pandemic, nowadays, a lot of places have shifted to offering card options, but it's still important that you carry around cash for a few different reasons. So as I mentioned before, you should definitely have coins if you ever need to tip someone, like a bathroom attendant, or if you need to use a vending machine or anything like that. Another thing to keep in mind is that water, for the most part, isn't free when you go to restaurants. I know in North America, it's very common to get tap water for free. They'll just bring it out without you even asking. But in Germany, if you ask for water, usually they'll assume that you're looking for bottled water, whether that's still or sparkling, even though the tap water is safe to drink. If you want tap water, you can ask for Leitungswasser, but it's honestly not very common to just get that instead of a drink. Sometimes if you're ordering like a beer, glass of wine, you can ask for Leitungswasser and it's not a big deal, but just etiquette-wise, it's not very common to just have tap water and not get anything to drink. Another thing you need to learn about is recycling and Pfand in Germany. So generally speaking, Germans are really into recycling, and one word you need to know is the term Pfand, and this refers to a refundable deposit that you pay on things like cans, bottles, and even glasses and mugs at beer gardens and Christmas markets. So basically, a Pfand functions as an incentive for you to return those items to get your money back. So in the case of cans and bottles, it incentivizes you to bring those back to a recycling center, or in the case of glasses and mugs, it prevents you from pocketing them as fun souvenirs, even though most people still do that. So this is a really important word to note because oftentimes the items that you buy will be more expensive than the listed price. So let's say if you're buying a can of Fanta from the supermarket and it says it's €1, sometimes there'll be like a Pfand that's like 25 cents on it. So in the end, the price of it will actually be €1.25, and you'll get the 25 cents back when you bring the can back. This is also true at Christmas markets, and it trips a lot of people up because it'll say, oh, okay, a Glühwein is like €3. But then when you go to pay for it, it's actually €6 because there's a €3 deposit on the cup. So you get that money back when you bring the cup back. Something that they'll also do at beer gardens and Christmas markets sometimes is they'll give you a little token with your cup, so that basically when you go to return the cup, you also give them the token, and then they know that you're the one who bought the cup. Another thing to keep in mind, if you're lucky enough to be visiting Germany during beer garden season, is to make sure you learn beer garden etiquette. So often with beer gardens, there's no table service. What you do is it's self-service. You go up, you grab your beer, you grab whatever food you want, and then you go to the Kasse or the cashiers and then pay there. Of course, it's also worth noting that drinking in public is very common in Germany. So it's not uncommon to see someone having a beer or glass of wine during a picnic in the park, or even seeing someone walking around with a bottle of beer walking on the street. So it's not really a big deal. Don't be shocked if you see it. Also, you should know that when you're at a restaurant, you have to ask for the bill. They're not going to bring it to you automatically just because they don't want to feel like they're rushing you during your meal. So if your waiter hasn't brought around the bill, make sure to flag them down and ask for it. Last but not least, don't forget to pack an adapter because the plugs in Germany look like this. And I would really highly recommend bringing a universal adapter just because then you're covered in all cases and you can just buy one and never have to buy another one for the rest of your travel life. So I think that's a really great investment. All right, I hope this list of Germany travel tips was helpful and you feel more confident in navigating the country now as a first timer. Be sure to let me know if you have any questions, and for more practical travel videos just like this one, be sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next week.